Hello, it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I am going to share with you my June reading wrap-up, and I am pleased to say that I read a ton in June, and I also took full advantage of my Scribd subscription. Not sponsored, but yeah, without further ado, let's get started. The first book that I started, but in actuality the last book that I finished, was White Rage, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide by Carol Anderson, and it's hard to describe my feelings towards this book. So first of all, this is a non-fiction historical piece that goes through American, United States policy making from the Reconstruction era after the abolition of slavery up until the present day. And it basically looks at the response of the white majority population to any sort of advancement by the black community, and that is why it is called the White Rage. So you have these intrinsic systems set in place to prohibit black people from gaining a foothold in success and in the country. And it goes through things like Jim Crow, the Black Codes, the Nixon and Reagan era, the war on drugs, and voter suppression, all that. And it hits you really hard because this book is dense as a brick. And it's like Carol Anderson came with receipts, and you are constantly every single piece of information that she gives you, there's a list of sources and footnotes and everything, and it's like you are doubting my words. Here is the historical context to everything that I am about to tell you. So she came with receipts. And it took me a long time to finish this book, mainly because I was actually interested, and I went through a lot of the footnotes and actually went in search of the historical context and went in search of sources to kind of gain more insight into what was being told to me, because I think Shannon from That's So Poe, because I buddy read this book with Shannon. Shannon said it best when she said that this is like a distilled version of history. It's like the most raw elements distilled into this dense packet of information. So it was really hard to read because of that, because you are getting so much information and it is so frankly disgusting. A lot of the things that have happened in history and in the United States I didn't know about, because we don't learn that in school in Finland. We are more focused on, if we're talking about imperialism and stuff, we are mostly focused on the British Empire in the Finnish school system, and the Russian and Swedish empires, for obvious reasons. So a lot of this was new information to me, and I am very happy to have read it. But I also wish that there was some... I don't want to say the word levity or brevity, because that makes it seem like, oh, I wish there was some more quips or something. No, that's not what I mean. I do wish that there was some more breathing room. For example, when you have these the Brown case about the school systems and the segregation of the school systems, and you have the voter suppression, I feel like I would have wanted a little bit more examples. Obviously it would have made the book longer, but I also feel like it would have made it easier to parse, that it would not have just been the distilled, dense packet. It would have given you a little bit more humanity, because you would have seen more examples of that injustice and gotten to know about more historic figures who had to fight the system and stuff. But as it is, I still thought that this book was very important. I still maintain that I am glad that I read it, and I'm glad that I buddy read it. Especially me and Shannon had some really awesome discussions about this book, and we were both very angry. So I gave this book 4 stars, and yeah, I would recommend you picking it up if you are interested to know why the United States currently is how it is, what is the historical context that has led to it being the way it is. The next book that I read was Delicious in Dungeon Volume 7 by Ryoko Kui. I can't tell you much about this because this is the 7th volume in an ongoing manga series that I have been really enjoying, but this particular volume delves a little bit deeper into the actual story. There are new characters and new political players introduced in this volume. You get to see more of the backstory of how the dungeon got established. You get to... This is the volume where you get Senshi's backstory, and it was a good volume, like one of the best volumes in the series, so I gave it 4 stars, and I can't wait for the next volume. And then I read Unnatural Volume 2 by Mirka Andolfo. I should preface this by saying that I have buddy read this series, the first volume and the second one, with Jena from Bibliofilth, and it's been fun discussing this series with her. To be honest, the way that the series is going, I have to admit that aside from the art, my general enjoyment of this reading experience is due to the conversations that I've had with Jena. So, the art of this series is phenomenal. It is very beautiful to look at. Basically, for the most part, what you see in the cover is what you get inside the book. It is very good. But I have to say that in the second volume, the art kind of takes a dip into not necessarily poorer quality, but a more rust quality. You see this especially with the sequential art. There's much more like sketchiness, and it is not as polished, and it is not as finished looking as the first volume was. The story also, the story is kind of all over the place. There's like new characters being established, and there's this, like, this book doesn't really know if it wants to be a supernatural or a scientific exploration of this topic. And it kind of tries to lean into both, and it was very confusing at times. And also, I feel like Leslie's character, the main character, is there to just cry and whine, and like every time she tries to do something and exert her own like agency over the situation, she gets like knocked down by other characters, and it's like it was not very fun to read, because I think that for the most part these characters just, there's no particular development. They are just a bunch of hackneyed tropes, and it's also like there's this weird thing where Leslie gets to know about other characters from everyone beside the character in question. Like the main love interest, she gets to hear his backstory from 2 other characters, and this other character's backstory she gets to hear from other characters beside that character. You know, it's very annoying. I wish those flashbacks could have been done a little bit differently, like more sensibly, because like really, like, gossiping about someone else's tragic past. That's just so, ugh. I can't. And also, the story is going a little bit on a cliche direction. I still have the last volume to read, but I'm kind of scared because I saw that Jena basically trashed it, so I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about it, but I gave the second volume 2.5 stars, mostly for the art. Yeah, it's I don't know if I want to recommend it. Maybe after I will read the third volume, I might do a full series review, but we shall see. Then I read Princess Ever After by Katie O'Neill. This was Katie O'Neill's first published comic, and I have really loved her Tea Dragon Society, and I've loved her Aquicorn Cove, and she's one of my favorite, like, picture book, comic book artists. She has this very distinctly Katie O'Neill kind of style. But you can really tell that this is the first publication, the origin story, basically, of Katie O'Neill, because the art is very different. It is much more generic than what I've gotten used to seeing from her, and the story is also very simplistic. It is about these two princesses that go on an adventure together, and basically a princess is locked in a tower and another princess comes to save her, and it's about their adventures and their little romance and stuff, and it's very much geared towards a middle grade audience, and it's supposed to be uplifting and heartfelt and wholesome. And it is all those things, but it is also very simplistic, and you don't really get to fully, like, love and embrace these characters because you don't really get to know them all that well. And the villain is also very one-dimensional, and I wish there could have been more exploration of that dynamic between the villain and the other main princess, because I feel like if there would have been more focus on that and more exploration of that relationship, the book could have been very good. I ended up giving Princess Ever After 3 stars. I think it's a fun read for your young kid if you want to teach them about, like, girl power and like LGBTQ plus issues. This is a very very nice and simple and not preachy primer for a younger reader. So yeah, that's my review. I read Näkymätön, Sukupuoli, Ei-binäärisiä, ihmisiä by Kaisu, Tervonen, Veera, Järvenpää, and Jenni, Holma. And this book, how to describe it? First of all, I enjoyed it. I've been trying to read more about the transgender and non-binary experience in Finland specifically, and I've been on the lookout for this book for a longer time, so when it was available at the library, I picked it up. And it is essentially, at first there are comics kind of explaining in general what it is to be transgender on a more broad level, and then after that there are a bunch of sort of biographies by different people the authors interviewed, who all identify as non-binary specifically. And it is about their experiences, how some of them, like, wanted to have treatments, like some of them wanted to have top surgery, some of them wanted to be on hormones, some of them didn't want any of those things. So it's a very broad look at different non-binary experiences in Finland. I will say that I wished the formatting could have been done a little bit differently. First of all, there are many allusions and many references to the current state of the Finnish transgender law, but in no part of the book is there any sort of explanation of what that law actually entails as of right now. I happen to know it because I am interested in the topic in general, but since this book is marketed towards people who might not know what non-binary identities are, I think it would have been beneficial to give some sort of a primer on the history of transgender rights in Finland, like a timeline, maybe essays or something, maybe something like a primer explaining what the trans law currently entails. And after that, you could have had the comics, and after that, you could have had the biographies, and then at the end, the dictionary, basically, or the terminology. So that would have made it more easily digestible for a general audience, while at the same time taking into account trans readers who are reading the book, basically. But yeah, it was a good reading experience. I identified with a lot of the things that were being said in the book and things that were being discussed, and some of it resonated with me very deeply. So I gave this book 4 stars, and if you are Finnish or you know Finnish, I would recommend picking it up. Then I'm moving on to the best books I read in the whole month. First off is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. And this book is a YA memoir, and it goes into the intersections of being black and being queer in the United States. And George M. Johnson basically details his life and his experience growing up black and queer from his early childhood up until after he graduated from college. And it goes through his experiences with violence, his experiences with sexual assault, and his experiences with grief. And it was a very powerful read. I basically just listened to it. I listened to it on audio, and I just sat there like wallowing in the words, and I just like listened to it in one sitting because I was so immersed. And after that, I basically went and got my own physical copy because I want to read it again in the physical form and annotate it and underline. I felt very connected to some of the phrases, especially this one, like, I'm paraphrasing, but this whole idea that if you want to be an activist, the first person you need to advocate towards is yourself. Like, those kinds of things, like, it was the little things, because obviously I'm not a man, I'm not black, I don't live in the United States, I've never had a frat experience or anything, or fraternity experience, but there were still so many things in George M. Johnson's experience that resonated with me and made me relate to him. And yeah, I just think that if you read, like, it's weird to say this, but if you read one book out of all these that I have mentioned today, maybe read this one, because it is, yeah, it's hard to describe it. I gave it 5 stars. I want to read it again ASAP. And yeah, it was so good. And the last book that I read in the month of June was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. I also listened to this one on audio, and man, this experience was a lot. I think this is now my favorite Elizabeth Acevedo book. Granted, I have only read Poet X and this one, but I feel like this was masterful, and I personally enjoyed it even more than the Poet X, and I enjoyed the Poet X a lot. This is about 2 sisters who don't know about each other. Their father has been leading a double life where he spends part of the year in the Dominican Republic with the other sister, and the rest of the year in New York with the other one, Yahaira and Kamina. And it's about family secrets coming to light. It's about bitterness. It's about abandonment, but it's also about family ties and building connections. There is a very important lesbian relationship at the forefront. One of the sisters is gay, and in Camino's case, who lives in the Dominican Republic, the book also deals with themes of poverty and classism. How Camino attends this very posh private school, but she's kind of an outsider going there because all of these other people are like these preppy sons and daughters of diplomats and like stuff. And it also looks at sexual harassment both in Yahaira's and Camino's point of view. And I know a lot of people have said that they didn't enjoy the verse as much in this one as they did in the Poet X. I just think that this is a different type of poetry being used in this book. I wouldn't compare this to Poet X in terms of format. I think they are their own individual narratives and their own individual formats, basically. But yeah, I just love this so much. I love that it was narrated by two narrators, like Acevedo narrates Yahaira herself, and then there's another narrator for Camino. It was so good. Like, it's hard to explain it. I just want more people to talk to me about this. Yeah, it was so good. Like, it was nearly perfect, and I gave it 5 stars. It was excellent. And I also bought a copy. And there you have it. Those were all the books that I read in the month of June. I know, I can't believe I read so many things. I am so happy. And tell me in the comments, have you read any of these books? If you have, which ones were your favorite? Are you planning to read any of these? Just talk to me in the comments. And leave me an emoji of an airplane in the comments, so I know you were here. And that's it. I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!